The rain came down hard that Tuesday morning, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of gray water. Maya pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders and ducked under the bus stop shelter. Her backpack, containing everything she owned in the world, sat heavy on her shoulders. She'd been up since 5, trying to stay dry and hoping the rain would stop before she had to move on. At 19 years old, Maya had been living on the streets for 8 months now. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She had plans once. College plans. Career plans. But life had other ideas, and when she aged out of foster care on her 18th birthday, those dreams seemed to slip away like water through her fingers. Still, she kept going. Every day she looked for work. Every day she tried to stay clean, stay hopeful, stay human. In her pocket she carried a small cloth bag with $17.63. It had taken her 2 weeks to save that much from odd jobs and the occasional kindness of strangers. She guarded it carefully. That money meant she could eat for the next few days if she was smart about it. The bus pulled up to the stop, its brakes hissing in the rain. Maya wasn't planning to get on. She was just using the shelter to stay dry. But then she noticed the man. He was older, maybe in his 50s, wearing an expensive-looking suit that was now soaked through. His gray hair was plastered to his head, and he was frantically patting down his pockets, searching for something. His briefcase lay open on the bench, papers threatening to fly away in the wind. No, the man muttered, checking the same pockets over and over again. This can't be happening. The bus driver, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes, called out impatiently, "You getting on or not? I'm already behind schedule." Yes, I just need a moment," the man said, his voice strained. "My phone died and I can't find my wallet. I must have left it in my car when it broke down. Is there any way I could just— No wallet, no ride?" The driver cut him off. "Company policy. I've heard every excuse in the book. Either pay or step back." Maya watched the man's shoulders slump. He looked defeated, embarrassed. She could see the other passengers staring, some with sympathy, others with annoyance at the delay. The man glanced at his watch and closed his eyes briefly. Whatever he needed to get to, it was clearly important. She knew that feeling. That helpless, desperate feeling when the world just keeps pushing you down and you can't seem to catch a break. She'd felt it almost every day for the past 8 months. Before she could talk herself out of it, Maya stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said softly. "How much is the fare?" The driver looked at her with surprise. $2.75. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out her cloth bag. Her fingers found the crumpled bills and she counted out $3, handing them to the driver. "Here, for him." The man turned to look at her, his eyes widening. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." He stopped mid-sentence, really seeing her for the first time. Her faded jeans with holes in the knees. Her jacket that was 2 sizes too big. The backpack that clearly held her whole life. "Young lady, you don't have to do this." "It's okay," Maya said with a small smile. "We all need help sometimes, right? Just take it." The driver took the money and waved the man onto the bus. He stood there for a moment, looking at Maya like he was trying to memorize her face. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya." "I'm Robert," he said. "Robert Sterling. And I promise you I will pay you back. I don't know how to thank you enough." Maya shook her head. "You don't need to pay me back. Just help someone else when you can. That's all." "But Robert started, but the driver cut him off. "Sir, we need to go, now." Robert climbed onto the bus, still looking back at Maya through the rain-streaked window. She gave him a little wave and watched as the bus pulled away, its red taillights disappearing into the gray morning. Maya sat down on the bench under the shelter and looked at what was left in her bag. $14.63. She did the math in her head. That was maybe 5 days of food if she was really careful. Maybe 4 if she got unlucky. The knot of worry in her stomach tightened, but she pushed it away. She'd done the right thing. She knew she had. That man had needed help, and she'd been able to give it. That had to count for something. Even if it meant she'd have to skip a meal or two later in the week, the rain started to let up a bit. Maya stood, shouldered her backpack, and started walking. She had 3 job applications to turn in today, and she needed to get to the library to use their computers to apply for more positions. She couldn't give up. Not today. Not ever. As she walked through the wet streets, Maya had no idea that the man on the bus was thinking about her too. She didn't know that Robert Sterling had just left a board meeting at his downtown office. She had no clue that he was the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the city, or that his net worth was more money than she could even imagine, and she definitely didn't know that in trying to find her again. Robert would turn her life upside down in ways she never could have predicted. All she knew was that she'd help someone who needed it, and that somehow, despite everything, she still had enough hope left to believe tomorrow might be better than today. That hope, as small as it was, would turn out to be the most valuable thing she owned. Robert Sterling made it to his board meeting just in time. His suit was still damp, his hair was a mess, and he knew he looked nothing like the polished CEO everyone expected. But none of that mattered. All through the meeting, as executives presented quarterly reports and discussed expansion strategies, his mind kept drifting back to the bus stop. He kept seeing her face. That young woman with tired eyes who had given him her last few dollars without a second thought. The way her hands had trembled slightly as she'd counted out the bills. The worn backpack that clearly held everything she owned. And that smile, genuine and kind, even though life had obviously been anything but kind to her. "Robert, your thoughts on the proposal?" He snapped back to attention. His CFO was looking at him expectantly along with 12 other board members. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" After the meeting, Robert sat alone in his office on the 47th floor. The rain had stopped, and the city stretched out below him, glittering and vast. Somewhere down there was Maya, the girl who had helped him. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. He wanted to find her and give her something. A reward, a thank you. Something that would actually make a difference in her life, but he realized he had no way to find her. He didn't know her last name. Didn't have a phone number? All he knew was her first name and what she looked like. In a city of 3 million people, that wasn't much to go on. Robert looked at his watch. It was 4:30. If he left now, he could make it back to that bus stop. Maybe she'd be there again. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. 40 minutes later, Robert stood at the same bus stop where he'd met Maya that morning. The bench was empty. He waited through 3 buses, watching people come and go. None of them were her. As the sun started to set, painting the sky orange and pink, he finally headed home, but he couldn't let it go. The next morning, Robert was back at the bus stop at 6:30. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of the young woman who'd shown him such unexpected kindness. He waited for 2 hours. Maya never showed up. On the 3rd day, Robert brought his executive assistant, Patricia, with him. "Sir, with all due respect, don't you think this is a bit excessive?" she asked as they stood at the bus stop. "You could just let it go." "You tried to find her." "No," Robert said firmly. "You don't understand, Patricia. This girl had nothing. I mean truly nothing. And she still helped me without expecting anything in return. When was the last time you saw that in this city? When was the last time anyone did something like that for a stranger?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Never, I guess." "Exactly," Robert said. "That kind of kindness is rare. I need to find her." He started asking people in the neighborhood. The convenience store owner on the corner, the woman who ran the laundromat, the security guard at the office building across the street. Most people just shook their heads. A few remembered seeing a young woman with a backpack who sometimes sat at the bus stop, but nobody knew where she'd gone. Robert hired a sketch artist and described Maya as best he could. The artist created a detailed drawing, and Robert had copies made. He posted them around the neighborhood with his phone number and a message, "Looking for Maya. Please call if you've seen her. She helped me, and I want to thank her." Days turned into a week. Robert's phone rang constantly. But none of the calls were about Maya. Mostly it was people asking for money or reporters wanting to know why a billionaire CEO was plastering posters around the city looking for a homeless girl. Robert ignored them all. Meanwhile, Maya had moved to a different part of the city. She'd had to leave her usual spots after some trouble at one of the shelters where she'd been staying. A fight had broken out between two other residents, and the shelter had closed temporarily. She'd ended up on the north side, near the university district. She spent her days the same way she always did, walking from business to business asking if they were hiring. Filling out application after application? She'd applied to 37 places in the past week alone. Fast food restaurants, retail stores, coffee shops, cleaning services. Anything that might give her a chance, but it was hard. Most places wanted an address, a phone number, references, things she didn't have. When she explained her situation, she could see the sympathy in people's eyes, followed quickly by that look that said, "I'm sorry, but we can't help you." It was getting harder to stay hopeful. She spent her evenings at the public library. It was warm there and safe. She could use the computers to apply for more jobs online and search for resources that might help her. The librarians were kind and didn't make her feel unwelcome. Even though she knew she probably shouldn't stay as long as she did, one particular librarian, an older gentleman named Mr. Chun, had taken a special interest in helping her. He showed her which websites had the best job listings and which community programs might be able to help. "Don't give up," he'd tell her each evening as the library prepared to close. "Something will come through." "I know it will." Mayel wanted to believe him. But as another week passed with no job offers and her money running lower, that belief was getting harder to hold on to. On the 9th day of searching, Robert was about to give up. He had a company to run, after all. He couldn't spend every spare moment looking for someone who might not want to be found. Maybe she'd moved to another city. Maybe she didn't want his help. Maybe he should just let the universe work things out. But that afternoon, something made him take one more drive through the area where he'd met Maya. He wasn't even sure why. Just a feeling, maybe. As he turned down a side street, he saw the public library and decided to stop. He'd left posters at most places around the old neighborhood, but not here. Robert walked into the library and approached the front desk. Mr. Chun looked up from his computer and smiled. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone," Robert said, pulling out the sketch. "A young woman named Maya. She's been homeless, probably carrying a backpack." "Have you seen her?" Mr. Chin's expression changed immediately. He looked at Robert with sudden caution. "Why are you looking for her? Is she in some kind of trouble?" No, nothing like that," Robert said quickly. "She helped me about a week and a half ago. Paid my bus fare when I was stranded. I just want to thank her properly and see if there's anything I can do to help her situation." Mr. Chun studied Robert's face for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if he could be trusted. Finally, he nodded slowly. "She comes here most evenings. Uses the computers. Usually arrives around 5 and stays until we close at 8. Robert felt his heart jump. "Is she here now?" "Not yet," Mr. Chun said, glancing at the clock. "It was only 3:30, but she's pretty regular. I'd say there's a good chance she'll show up. Would it be okay if I waited?" Robert asked. Mr. Chun hesitated. "Look, I don't know what your intentions are, but Maya's a good kid. She's been dealt a bad hand, but she's trying her best. If you're here to make things harder for her, I promise you, I'm not," Robert interrupted. "I just want to help. That's all." Something in Robert's voice must have convinced him because Mr. Chun nodded toward the reading area. "You can wait over there. But if she gets uncomfortable or asks you to leave her alone, you do it." "Understood?" "Understood," Robert agreed. He bought a coffee from the small cafe inside the library and sat down with the newspaper, though he couldn't concentrate on the words. Every time the door opened, his head snapped up. 4:45 came and went. 5 o'clock. 5:15. Maybe she wasn't coming today. Then at 5:30, the door opened and there she was. Maya walked in with her backpack, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired but determined, heading straight for the computer stations like she'd done this 100 times before. Robert stood up slowly, his heart pounding. After all this searching, he'd finally found her. But now that she was here, he wasn't sure what to say. How do you approach someone you've been desperately searching for without seeming strange or frightening them? He took a deep breath and walked toward her, rehearsing words in his head. This was it. The moment that would change everything, though neither of them knew it yet. Maya was halfway through logging into the computer when she heard someone clear their throat behind her. She turned around and froze. Standing there, looking slightly nervous, was the man from the bus stop, Robert, the one she'd helped almost 2 weeks ago. Maya? He said, his face breaking into a relieved smile. I can't believe I finally found you. She blinked in surprise. Robert, what are you doing here? Looking for you, he said simply. I've been searching everywhere. I went back to that bus stop every day for over a week. Maya felt confused. Why would anyone spend that much time looking for her? You really didn't need to do that. It was just bus fare. It wasn't just bus fare to me, Robert said. Listen, I know this might seem strange, but would you let me buy you dinner? A proper thank you? There's a diner just down the street. Nothing fancy, I promise. Maya hesitated. She'd learned to be careful about offers that seemed too good. But there was something genuine in Robert's eyes. And honestly, she was hungry. She'd had a granola bar for breakfast and nothing since. Okay, she said finally. But just for a little while. I have job applications to finish. 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a booth at Tony's diner. The smell of coffee and grilled food filled the air. Robert ordered a burger and fries. Maya ordered the same, trying not to look too eager, even though her stomach was growling. So tell me, Robert said once the waitress left. How did you end up at that bus stop that morning? Maya shrugged, wrapping her hands around the warm coffee mug. Same way I end up most places. I was trying to stay dry and figure out my next move. You're homeless, Robert said gently. It wasn't a question, Maya nodded, feeling the familiar flush of shame creep up her neck. But Robert's face showed no judgment, only concern. 8 months now, she said quietly. Since last March, what happened? If you don't mind me asking. Maya took a sip of her coffee, wondering how much to share. But something about Robert made her feel like she could trust him. Maybe it was the way he really listened. Or maybe she was just tired of carrying her story alone. I grew up in foster care, she began. My mom died when I was 3. Drug overdose. Never knew my dad. So I went into the system, and I stayed there until I turned 18. That must have been hard, Robert said. It was, Maya admitted. I lived in 7 different homes. Some were okay. Some were really bad. But I learned to survive, you know? I kept my head down, focused on school. I thought if I could just make it to 18, if I could just graduate high school, everything would be fine. The food arrived, and Maya tried not to wolf it down, even though she wanted to. Robert seemed to notice and ordered a basket of mozzarella sticks, too. For the table, he said with a wink. So what happened when you turned 18? He asked. That's when you age out of the system, Maya explained. On your 18th birthday, you're basically on your own. No more foster home. No more support. They give you a little bit of money and some information about resources, and that's it. You're an adult now. Good luck, she paused, remembering that day. The mix of freedom and terror she'd felt. I had a plan, though. I'd been accepted to community college with a partial scholarship. I'd saved up some money from working part-time at a grocery store. I found a cheap apartment with 2 other girls. I thought I had it all figured out. But? Robert prompted gently. But life doesn't care about your plans, Maya said with a sad smile. The scholarship covered tuition, but not books or supplies. Those cost way more than I expected. And the apartment, even split 3 ways, ate up most of my paycheck. I was working 30 hours a week and taking classes full-time, and I still couldn't make ends meet. She took a bite of her burger, the taste almost overwhelming after days of eating so little. Then I got sick. Just a bad flu, but I missed a week of work. Lost my job. Couldn't pay rent. My roommates couldn't cover my part, so I had to leave. I thought I'd find another job quick, but it's hard to get hired when you don't have an address or a phone number. What about your classes? Robert asked. Had to drop out? Maya said, and she could hear the pain in her own voice. That was the hardest part. I was doing well too. Had a 3.7 GPA, but you can't go to college when you're worried about where you're going to sleep that night or where your next meal is coming from. Robert was quiet for a moment, his eyes sad. And you've been on the streets ever since? Maya nodded. I stay in shelters when I can get a spot, but they fill up fast. Sometimes I sleep in the laundromat or in a 24-hour restaurant if they let me. Libraries are good during the day. I keep trying to find work, but it's this impossible cycle. You can't get a job without an address, and you can't get an address without a job. But you haven't given up, Robert observed. Some days I want to, Maya admitted honestly. Some days I'm so tired and so hungry and so scared that I just want to disappear. But then I think about the kids who are still in the system, the ones who are going to age out just like I did with nobody to help them. And I think if I can just get back on my feet, if I can finish school, maybe I can do something to help them. Maybe I can make it so they don't have to go through what I'm going through. She looked down at her plate, embarrassed by how much she'd shared. Sorry, I don't usually talk this much. Don't apologize, Robert said firmly. I asked because I wanted to know. Maya, what you did for me at that bus stop, giving away money when you had so little yourself, that takes a special kind of person. Most people in your situation would have looked the other way. Maya shrugged. You needed help. I could give it. That's all. That's not all, though, is it? Robert leaned forward. Tell me something. If you could do anything, if money and circumstances weren't an issue, what would you do? Maya didn't have to think about it. I'd finish college, get my degree in social work. Then I'd create programs to help foster kids transition to independence. Like a bridge program. Somewhere they could live affordably, get help finding jobs, learn life skills. Nobody should have to end up on the streets just because they turned 18. Her eyes lit up as she talked, her passion evident. And I'd set up mentorship programs. Pair kids with adults who actually care about them. Because that's what most of us never had. Someone who believed in us. Someone who saw our potential instead of just seeing a foster kid or a statistic. Robert listened intently, watching the transformation in her face as she spoke about her dreams. Here was someone who had every reason to be bitter, to be angry at the world. Instead, she wanted to help others. It reminded him of himself many years ago. What if I told you, Robert said slowly, that I might be able to help you make that happen? Maya's expression changed from excitement to caution. What do you mean? Robert pulled out his business card and slid it across the table. Maya picked it up and read it. Her eyes went wide. Sterling Innovations, she read aloud. Chief Executive Officer. She looked up at him in shock. You're a CEO? I am, Robert confirmed. And I want to tell you about a program my company is developing. But first, I want you to know something. I grew up poor too. Really poor. My single mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I only made it because a teacher saw something in me and refused to let me quit. She helped me get into college, helped me navigate a world I knew nothing about. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. That teacher changed my life. And when you helped me at that bus stop, you reminded me why I started my company in the first place. Not just to make money, but to create opportunities. To help people the way I was helped. Maya sat very still, afraid to hope. I don't understand. You will, Robert said with a gentle smile. But I don't want to pressure you or make promises I can't keep. So here's what I'm asking. Take my card. Take a day or 2 to think about this. Research me, research my company. Make sure this is legitimate. Then, if you're interested, call the number on that card and ask for Patricia. She set up a meeting and we can talk about how I might be able to help you get back on your feet and pursue those dreams of yours. Maya stared at the card in her hand like it might disappear if she blinked. Why would you do this for me? Because someone did it for me once, Robert said simply. And because after searching this entire city for you, I'm convinced that people like you are exactly the kind of people the world needs more of. You just need a chance to show everyone what you're capable of. Maya sat on a bench outside the library, staring at Robert's business card until the streetlights came on. Part of her wanted to believe this was real, but she'd been disappointed too many times before. Life had taught her that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned on the cot at the shelter, the card tucked safely in her jacket pocket. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would check him out, just like he'd suggested. If it was a scam or some kind of weird setup, at least she'd know. The next day, Maya was at the library the moment it opened. Mr. Chin saw her rush in and smiled knowingly. "Big plans today?" "Research," Maya said. Heading straight for the computers. She typed Robert Sterling Innovations into the search bar and hit enter. Her eyes went wide as page after page of results filled the screen. News articles, business profiles, Forbes lists. This wasn't just some guy with a small company. Robert Sterling was the real deal. She clicked on an article from 6 months ago. Tech giant Sterling Innovations posts record profits. Another one, Robert Sterling's journey from poverty to billions. She read that one carefully and her heart started beating faster. The article talked about how Robert grew up in a rough neighborhood, how his mother cleaned office buildings at night to support them, how a teacher had helped him get a scholarship to college. It was all true. Everything he'd told her was true. Maya spent 3 hours reading everything she could find about Robert and his company. She learned about their products, their expansion, their charitable work. She found interviews where Robert talked about giving back and creating opportunities. There was even a photo of him at a youth center, surrounded by kids from rough backgrounds, teaching them about technology. But what really caught her attention was an article from 2 months ago. Sterling Innovations announces new initiative to combat homelessness and support at-risk youth. The program was still in development. The article said, but Robert had pledged $10 million to get it started. Maya sat back in her chair, her hands shaking slightly. This was real. This was actually real. She pulled out the business card and stared at the phone number. Her fingers hovered over it for a long moment before she finally worked up the courage to dial. Sterling Innovations, this is Patricia speaking. How may I help you? The voice was warm and professional. Maya almost hung up, but forced herself to speak. Hi, my name is Maya. Robert Sterling told me to call and ask for you. There was a brief pause, and then Patricia's voice changed, becoming even warmer. Maya, yes, Mr. Sterling told me you might call. He's been hoping to hear from you. When would you be available to come in for a meeting? I'm available pretty much any time, Maya said, feeling awkward. How about tomorrow at 10? I'll send a car to pick you up. Where should the driver meet you? Maya's mind raced. She couldn't give them the shelter address. That felt too embarrassing. The library on Maple Street? The public one? Perfect, Patricia said. The driver will be there at 9:45, and Maya? Mr. Sterling really is looking forward to seeing you again. After she hung up, Maya sat there in stunned silence. This was happening. This was actually happening. The next morning, Maya woke up at 5. She used the shelter's bathroom to wash up as best she could, scrubbing her face and hands until they were pink. She put on her cleanest pair of jeans and the nicest shirt she owned, a simple blue blouse she'd gotten from a donation center. It wasn't much, but it was the best she had. At 9:30, she was standing outside the library, her backpack on her shoulders and her stomach in knots, when a sleek black car pulled up at exactly 9:45. She thought she might throw up from nerves. The driver, a kind-looking older man, got out and smiled at her. Maya? She nodded, not trusting her voice. I'm David. Mr. Sterling sent me to bring you to the office. Ready to go? The drive downtown felt like a dream. Maya watched the city go by through the tinted windows, her reflection staring back at her. She looked scared. She looked small. But she was here, and that had to count for something. Sterling Innovations occupied the top 15 floors of one of the tallest buildings downtown. Maya followed David through the gleaming lobby, past security, and into an elevator that moved so fast her ears popped. When the doors opened on the 47th floor, Patricia was waiting. She was exactly how Maya had imagined from her voice. Maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense air about her. "Maya, it's so wonderful to meet you," she said, shaking Maya's hand. "Mr. Sterling is just finishing up a call, but he'll be with you in a moment. Can I get you something? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great," Maya said. Her mouth suddenly dry, Patricia led her to a conference room with windows that looked out over the entire city. Maya had never been this high up before. She could see for miles in every direction. It made her feel small and large at the same time. Robert came in a few minutes later, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Maya, you came." "I'm so glad." "I did my research," Maya said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "You're kind of a big deal." Robert laughed. "I suppose. But that doesn't matter right now. What matters is you. Patricia, could you bring in the presentation materials?" For the next hour, Robert and Patricia explained the program. It was called the Second Chance Initiative, and it was designed to help people who had faced systemic barriers get back on their feet. Selected participants would receive housing in a small apartment building the company had purchased. They'd get a monthly living stipend, full college tuition coverage, access to job training and mentorship, mental health support, everything they needed to succeed. "The only requirements," Robert explained, "are that you maintain at least a 3.0 GPA, perform 10 hours of community service per month, and meet regularly with your assigned mentor. The program lasts up to 4 years or until you complete your degree, whichever comes first." Maya listened, her heart pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it. "And you want me to be part of this?" "You'd be part of our pilot group," Patricia said. "We're starting with 5 individuals. You'd be the first, but why me?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are so many people who need help. Why choose me?" Robert leaned forward, his expression serious. "Because in the 2 weeks I spent looking for you, I learned something important. The best indicator of future success isn't where someone comes from or what advantages they had. It's character, it's kindness, it's resilience. You have all of that, Maya. What you did at that bus stop proved it." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes. She tried to blink them back, but they spilled over anyway. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Robert said gently. "I know this is overwhelming. Take some time. But before you go, I want to show you something." He pulled up a presentation on the screen at the front of the room. Photos of a renovated apartment building appeared, then floor plans. Then photos of the individual apartments. They were small but beautiful, clean, safe. Each one had a bedroom, a bathroom, a small kitchen, and a living area. "This is where you'd live," Robert said. "Your own space, your own key. Your own fresh start." Maya couldn't speak. She just stared at the photos, imagining what it would be like to have a door she could lock. A bed that was hers, a place that was safe. "There's more," Patricia said, her voice gentle. She handed Maya a folder. "This packet has all the information about the program. Rules, expectations, resources available to you. Take it home and read through it carefully. If you have questions, my number is on the first page. Call me anytime." Maya took the folder with shaking hands. "I have to be honest with you," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm scared. I'm scared this is too good to be true. I'm scared I'll mess it up. I'm scared I'll let you down." Robert reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Those fears are normal. But Maya, you survived 8 months on the streets while still trying to better yourself. You helped a stranger even when you had almost nothing. You haven't given up on your dreams even when everything seemed hopeless. That tells me you're not going to let anyone down. Especially not yourself." He pulled back and smiled. "Take a few days, read everything, think about it. And when you're ready, call Patricia. Whatever you decide, I want you to know something. Meeting you changed something in me. It reminded me why I do what I do. So thank you for that." Maya left the building in a daze, the folder clutched to her chest like a lifeline. David drove. her back to the library, and she spent the rest of the day sitting on a bench, reading through every page of the packet. The program outline, the expectations, the support services, the apartment photos. That night at the shelter, Maya lay awake again, but this time it was different. This time, for the first time in 8 months, she wasn't thinking about where she'd sleep tomorrow or where her next meal would come from. She was thinking about the future, a real future. A possible future. The next morning, Maya called Patricia before she could lose her nerve. "I'm in," she said simply. "I want to do this." Patricia's voice was warm with joy. "I'm so glad, Maya. So very glad. Can you come in tomorrow? We'll get you signed up and moved in." "Tomorrow?" Maya's voice squeaked. Unless you need more time?" "No," Maya said quickly. "Tomorrow is perfect. Tomorrow is absolutely perfect." When she hung up, Maya sat on the shelter steps and let herself cry. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of relief, of hope, of possibility. After 8 long months of barely surviving, she was finally going to get her chance. She was finally going home. 2 years had passed since that rainy Tuesday morning at the bus stop. 2 years since Maya had given away her last few dollars to help a stranger. 2 years since her life had changed completely. Maya stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, straightening her blazer. It still felt strange sometimes, looking at herself like this. Professional. Put together, confident. The girl who used to sleep in laundromats and count pennies for food seemed like a different person now. But she was still there, underneath. Maya never wanted to forget where she came from. Today was special. Today she was speaking at a conference for nonprofit organizations, sharing her story and talking about the work she'd been doing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Robert. "Good luck today. You're going to be amazing. Proud of you." She smiled and texted back a quick thank you. Robert had become more than just the CEO who'd given her a chance. He'd become a mentor, a friend, someone who genuinely cared about her success. They met for coffee every other week, talking about her classes, her work, her goals for the future. Maya grabbed her bag and headed out. The apartment building where she lived housed all 5 participants in the Second Chance Initiative now. When she'd first moved in, she'd been alone, terrified she'd mess everything up. But then others had joined. There was Tommy, a veteran who'd struggled with PTSD and homelessness after leaving the military. Kaisha, a single mother who'd lost everything after a medical emergency. David, who'd aged out of foster care just like Maya, and Lisa, a former addict who'd been clean for 6 months and was working hard to stay that way. They'd become like a family. They ate dinner together sometimes, studied together, supported each other through the hard days. Because even with all the help, there were still hard days. The conference was being held at a big hotel downtown. Maya walked into the ballroom and felt her stomach flip. There had to be 300 people there. Robert was already seated in the front row, giving her an encouraging nod. Patricia sat next to him, along with several other people from Sterling Innovations. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she walked up to the podium on shaking legs. She looked out at all those faces and took a deep breath. 2 years ago, she began, her voice steadier than she felt, I was homeless. I slept in shelters and laundromats anywhere I could find that was safe. I carried everything I owned in a backpack. I went days without eating properly. I applied for job after job, only to be rejected because I didn't have an address or a phone number. The room was completely silent. Maya could see people leaning forward, listening intently. But I was also lucky, because one rainy morning I was at a bus stop when a man needed help. He couldn't pay his fare, and I gave him my last $3. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what would happen next. I just knew he needed help, and I could give it. She smiled at Robert. That man turned out to be Robert Sterling, and instead of just saying thank you and moving on with his life, he spent 2 weeks searching the entire city for me. When he found me, he offered me something I never thought I'd have again. A chance. Maya went on to talk about the Second Chance Initiative, about her journey back to college, about the 3.9 GPA she'd worked so hard to maintain. She talked about the part-time job she had at Sterling Innovations, working in their community outreach department. But most importantly, she talked about the work she'd been doing on her own. Every week, she said, I volunteer at 3 different homeless shelters. I talk to young people who are going through what I went through. I help them fill out job applications. I bring them donated clothes and toiletries. I listen to their stories because I know what it feels like to be invisible, to have people look right through you like you don't matter. Her voice grew stronger. I also mentor 4 kids who are about to age out of foster care. I meet with them weekly, teaching them things nobody taught me, how to budget money, how to find resources, how to advocate for themselves. Because I don't want them to end up on the streets like I did. The applause started before she even finished. Maya felt tears prick her eyes as she looked out at the crowd. When she stepped down from the podium, at least a dozen people came up to talk to her, asking questions about the program, about how they could create similar initiatives in their own cities. Robert found her during the break, pulling her into a hug. That was incredible, Maya, truly incredible. I was so nervous, she admitted. You couldn't tell, Patricia said, joining them. You're a natural speaker. Have you thought about what Mr. Sterling and I discussed with you last week? Maya's heart skipped a beat. Last week, Robert and Patricia had sat her down with an offer that still seemed impossible. They wanted to expand the Second Chance initiative into something bigger. Much bigger. I've thought about it, Maya said carefully. But I still have 2 more years of school left. We know, Robert said. That's why we're proposing you come on board gradually. Work with us part-time while you finish your degree, help us design and launch the expansion. Then, when you graduate, if you're still interested, we want you to run the whole thing. Patricia pulled out a folder. We're calling it the Maya Johnson Foundation, a separate nonprofit funded by Sterling Innovations dedicated to helping foster youth and homeless young people. $50 million to start? You'd be the executive director? Maya stared at the folder, unable to process what they were saying. You want to name it after me? Your story is the foundation of everything we're building, Robert said. You're the reason this exists. It should carry your name. That evening, Maya rode the bus home. She could have taken a car service now, could have called a ride, but she liked the bus. It reminded her of where she'd been, kept her grounded in reality. As she sat by the window, watching the city pass by, she noticed a young man at the next stop. He was digging through his pockets, looking worried. When the bus pulled up, she heard him explain to the driver that he'd lost his wallet. Maya stood up and walked to the front of the bus. I've got it, she said, sliding her card to pay his fare. The young man looked at her with surprise and gratitude. Thank you so much. I'll pay you back, I promise. Maya smiled, remembering saying almost the same words to Robert. No need. Just help someone else when you can. That's all. She returned to her seat, and as the bus pulled away, she saw her reflection in the window. For the first time in a long time, she recognized herself completely. The girl who'd survived. The woman she'd become. They were both there, both part of who she was. 3 months later, Maya stood in front of another crowd. This time it was the official launch of the Maya Johnson Foundation. Donors, supporters, and 50 young people who would be the foundation's first. Participants filled the room. Robert stepped up to the microphone first. 2 years ago, a young woman taught me something important. She taught me that kindness doesn't depend on what you have. It depends on who you are. Maya had almost nothing, but she still gave. Today, we're here to honor that spirit of generosity and to extend it to others who need it most. Then it was Maya's turn. She looked out at the young faces in the crowd, kids who reminded her so much of herself. Kids who just needed someone to believe in them. I know what it's like to feel forgotten, she said. To feel like you don't matter. To feel like nobody sees you. But you do matter. Every single one of you matters. And this foundation exists to prove it. She paused, emotion catching in her throat. 3 years ago, I paid for a stranger's bus fare with money I couldn't really afford to give. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I had no idea it would change my life. But the truth is, that moment didn't change my life because of what I got in return. It changed my life because it reminded me of something important. Maya looked directly at the young people in front of her. No matter how hard things get, no matter how dark it seems, you never lose your power to help others. You never lose your humanity. Hold on to that. It's the most valuable thing you have. The room erupted in applause. As Maya looked around at all the faces, at Robert beaming with pride, at Patricia wiping away tears, at the young people who would now get their own second chances, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt home. Not because of the apartment or the job or the success, but because she'd found her purpose. She'd found her way to make a difference, and it had all started with $3 and a choice to be kind when kindness seemed impossible. Maya smiled, thinking about that rainy morning at the bus stop. She'd given away her last few dollars that day, but what she'd received in return was worth more than any amount of money could ever be. She'd received hope, purpose, a future. And now, she was giving that same gift to others. That night, as Maya rode the bus home one more time, she looked out at the city lights and whispered a quiet thank you. To Robert for seeing her worth. To herself for never giving up. And to that rainy Tuesday morning that had changed everything. Tomorrow, 50 young people would start their journey in the program. They'd get their own apartments, their own chances, their own futures, and Maya would be there to guide them, just as Robert had guided her. The circle of kindness that had started at a bus stop was now rippling outward, touching more lives than she'd ever imagined possible. And this was just the beginning.